Alright, so today what I want to show you how to do is use interfaces. Now, one really great thing about interfaces is that they're very modular, they're easy to set up, and they're less process intensive for what you're trying to do, so you can save a little bit of time there. Okay, so I want to show you guys how to set those up. First thing you need to do is you have to make an interface. So let me go ahead and just clean some things up here so you guys don't have to stare at all these tabs. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these, and then we're just going to go through each one in turn. Okay, so first one is the trigger pad. So we made a trigger pad previously in another video, and this is the exact same one, really. All we have to do is make a few small changes. Before we do that, we need to make our interface. So let's go down into the content drawer. And I've made a few other files in here. I'll show you guys how to get to those or how to make them yourselves if you'd like to. For mine today, we're just going to be working in user blueprints, and we're going to make our first interface. You can see I have one right here. I'm going to right click. We're going to go to user interface down here. I'm sorry, not that one. Blueprints right here, and we're going to do a blueprint interface, which is right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to do this, call this BPI underscore, let's call this fear trigger, because previously we were just, I was using scare trigger, fear trigger. That should be easy enough to keep separate. When we go into a BPI or a blueprint interface, they're very simple and we don't really have a lot to work with here. So the only thing you really need to do is go up to your function, change the name of the function to something that you understand what it is. You can have multiple functions inside of here if you want to, and these can get kind of complex, but for the most part interfaces are fairly easy. So let's see, let's call this trigger fear, because we're kind of keeping with that. And then we're also going to be applying damage with this interface, so we can trigger things and we can also say, hey, apply damage to anything with this. So we're going to add an input. This one's going to be, let's call it fear level. And we need to make sure that it is an integer. Okay, now sometimes on this one, I don't know why, but sometimes you have to set it twice. There we go. Gonna go ahead and hit compile, save, and effectively we're done. We don't really need to work with this anymore, so we can close that out. Let's go back to our content drawer. Actually, the trigger pad's already out there, so let's just go ahead and start with that one. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the trigger pad, hit edit the trigger pad, and that pops it up. Now, as far as everything that we're doing, we're still going to be using a cast. We're still looking for something to overlap with that collider for the trigger pad, because we still need something to work kind of in the old way here. And we're just checking to make sure it's our player character that's touching that. Then we have the one-time setup here with the branch and the one-time trigger for the Boolean that we have separately right here. You guys have made this before if you've gone through a previous video. Then this is a little bit different. This for each loop right here is how we're including all of the different things that we want to have tied to this trigger pad. So right here we have hooked up scares. This is an actor variable, and to make that we just go in here, we can call this scares for now. And on the Boolean side of it, instead of just specifying a specific actor, we just say actor, and we get an object reference. And to make it an array, we just go up here and on the right side while we have that highlighted, and we click on array. Okay, now the way this makes things easy for us, we're going to make it instance editable, and this is how this makes it so much nicer. I want to go ahead and just get rid of scares now. We're going to stay with hooked up scares. Go ahead and hit compile, and if you click on the trigger pad, you'll notice over here on the side under our defaults for this, we have 3 things already hooked up, and we can just add in a whole ton of things that this trigger pad can set off, and I don't have to do anything else other than make sure I add them right here. And this makes things a lot easier because I can have several different trigger pads that have lots of different things that are hooked up to it. I can trigger tons of just a lot of different things. So that definitely makes life a little bit easier than having to go through and set up object references for each individual thing that you want to have talk to this. Okay, so right now I've got the jump scares, the scarecrow jump scares, and a fear grenade set up. So let me show you how we get those working. Let's start off with the Scarecrow. That's probably one of the easier ones to take a look at. Let's go ahead and hit that. Alright, so as far as the Scarecrow is concerned, and something that we have to make sure we do on all of these, so let me go back to the trigger pad too. This trigger scare right here, you're not going to be able to get this, and in the Scarecrow you're not going to be able to pop this event if we don't include our user interface. So let me go back to our trigger pad, and let's make sure our interface is in here. To do this, we go up to Class Settings. Over here on the right side under Details, you'll find the interface that you're going to be using. We made a new interface, so I'm going to call, let's see, we used Fear there. Got to spell that right. Okay, BPI Fear Trigger. Let's go ahead and add that one in. Now we have both of these. And right here where we have Trigger Scare, what I want to do is I need to switch it over to the new interface that we just made. And I'm going to drag off this array element right here, and I'm going to get Trigger Fear. We're going to get the message on this one. There is another version that you can get, and it's a little bit different, like a call function, like you see here. And we don't really want this because the target that we're seeing for the BPI interface, we're not going to interact with that necessarily. We don't want to change anything in the interface, so just get rid of that. And we're just going to drag off that array element there and use Trigger Fear. We're just getting the message off of that. We're going to hook up our execution pin, and we're not applying any damage at this point. We're just calling things. So the fear level, we can just leave it as 0. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that and hook this up right here. Okay, now we're going to go over to our Scarecrow Jump Scare, and it's already got an interface associated with it as well. So I'm going to go back to our class settings, and I'm going to hook up the new one. So we go up to class settings, we're going to add fear, there we go, BPI Fear Trigger. So now we have Trigger Fear there. And the way to get this kind of event dispatcher, or the event right here, is just double clicking on the interface on that input, and we'll just hook this up. If you kind of think about an interface a little bit like an event dispatcher, they work in a similar way, but the setup is just a little bit quicker, I feel like, and you don't have to often go back and redo nodes if you change something. So like if we wanted to add on another input, it would just automatically proliferate through everything. You'd see it show up and everything without having to redo a lot of nodes. So everything else as far as the jump scare is concerned stays the same. We're still playing a sound, we still have animation, we're setting the relative location, rotation, everything still stays the same. Okay, so whenever Trigger Pad does this Trigger Fear right here, it'll go out to anything that's listening to it, this event Trigger Fear right here, and just make every bit of code happen from that event. Okay, so we're good there on our Scarecrow. Next thing we need to look at is our, go down here to the user blueprints, and we need to work on our Fear Grenade spawner. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this one's using the exact same setup. We just need to include the interface. So we're going to go to class settings. We're going to do fear, BPI Fear Trigger. There we go. Now we have that, and I can just bring in that event, hook this up right there, and this will effectively spawn, it'll spawn the Fear Grenade whenever we jump into this. Now, we have the Fear Grenade spawner, so we need to take a look at the Fear Grenade itself. And it's going to be a little bit different because it's dealing damage. So let's go ahead and take a look. Here's our Fear Grenade right here. And just like we've done before, we need to make sure it has the interface tied to it. So we're going to take care of that first. Fear Trigger, there we go. Now, what we're checking for here is we're checking to see, instead of casting, we're checking to see if what we're looking for is implementing this interface. So this is something we can do instead of having it check on a cast. And when you cast to something, you get that object or that actor and you put it into memory and you keep it there. It doesn't really get rid of it all right away. So this is something that can accumulate over time if you're checking for a lot of different things. But the nice thing too is we can check multiple things at once. We don't have to just see like, oh, is this a third person character? Well, we can check and see, does this thing have the interface? Well, we can have tons of things that have this interface. So for instance, if we had a bomb go off, or we had a grenade actually go off, or we have somebody spraying an area with color or something like that, we don't have to go in and say, oh, cast to this and cast to that and cast to the walls and cast to everything else. We just see, does it have the interface involved with it, and then it takes care of itself. It takes care of whatever it needs to do. So that can make things a little bit easier for us. So in this case, we're doing the trigger message here as well, and we're checking to see, does it use the interface. In this case, we want to check, is it using the fear interface that we just made. And if it is, then I'll figure over here to where we're going to actually call the message. In this case, we want to apply some damage. So I'm going to drag off the other actor there, and we're going to do fear trigger. There we go. That's our message. Now, right now, it's delivering 0. It's delivering 0 points of fear to what we're doing. So we'll want to add something in there. Let's do 10, just like we saw before probably. And then as soon as the fear grenade pops up, we want it to show for just like a small fraction of a second, 0.2 seconds, and then we got it to destroy itself. Okay, so what's going to happen with this is as soon as it touches anything with the fear trigger interface, it's going to go through and do the rest of this stuff here. So it is going to touch some other things that are getting the fear trigger interface. So for instance, the spawner is actually this big glass dome that I put in here, and that's just to give you an idea of where that grenade's going to go off. And if you look down here, it is touching the scarecrows that are right here. So it is going to disappear fairly quickly, but I have it hanging out for just a split second. And I also have it not quite on the trigger area, so that if your character manages to stop before they walk into that space, then they won't get hit by the fear grenade. But let's go ahead and take a look and see how things are going. One thing right now actually is everything should get triggered normally. Let's go ahead and just walk into it. Okay. The scarecrows came up and they launched without any issue. Now what we want to do is show how the fear is actually showing up on our character. So we're going to have to go to our character. Let's go to the content browser. We're going to go back to content itself, and then we're going to go to third person. Okay. On the blueprints here for our third person character, we're going to do the same thing as we've done with a few other things. So the event trigger scare that we have, this is from our previous interface. We need to add the new interface that we just added that we're using for kind of demo purposes right now. Okay, let's add in BPI fear trigger. Okay, so if we go over here under interfaces, we can see we have trigger fear now. And I'll go ahead and double click, bring this in so we can work with this in the exact same way we have been. What this is doing is it's getting any kind of fear trigger that's going out and telling everybody else like, hey, we're doing something. And we want to run this into our setup for calculating the current fear. So you're going to need a couple of variables. Current fear is going to be what the current number is for your fear rating, and then you'll also have max fear. Max fear we're going to need for something a little bit later. This also tells us like, oh, well, this person's been scared to death. They've reached the max fear they can handle. And we'll also use this as a way to calculate percentage for filling out the HUD that we're going to be building later. Min fear, minimum fear, maybe you need it, maybe not. It's possible you might need it if you're going to be using a space where the person can calm down and lose some of their fear. Might be handy to have it. But otherwise, really, current fear and max fear are going to be your biggest ones that you need to get a hold of. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that old one that we had there. This is our new interface that we just built. And the fear level coming in, this is going to be in particular coming from our fear grenade. Okay, so right here we have trigger fear. This one's going to say like, hey, we want anything that has this interface. We're going to send it fear level 10, or in a sense, we're sending damage this way. Okay, so we're going to go back into our third person character. We're going to take the amount of damage that's coming in from our fear grenade. We're going to add it to our current fear, which we start off at 0. You'll notice right over here we have it, the current default value, set for 0. Current fear, where we got that? There it is, down here at the bottom. Current fear is 0. And since we're building up fear, we don't necessarily want to take it down like we do with health. So we add that to that current fear and the fear level that we just got from the grenade together. We get the set. So we'll bring in current fear and we'll set that just like we have up here. Then right now I just have it printing out to a print string. Okay, so this is going to be something we'll build into our user interface here in just a second. And whenever the game starts, you could either decide that as soon as event begin play happens, we set current fear at 0 just to make sure it stays at current fear. Or you can put it into your construction script here, and you could have this set current fear at 0 here. Okay, either way is fine. We are going to have some stuff a little bit later on that's going to need to kick off as soon as event begin play happens for our HUD, and we're going to put that in another video. All right, well, let's go ahead and test this out and see how it goes. Go ahead and hit compile. All right, and we're going to play it. Okay, so let's see. We're going to start off. Let's see that we have 10 for our current fear rating, and then I've got a few other fear grenades out here, and that'll add it up to 20, 30. Let's go back over this way. Should be 40 and 50. Okay, so we're starting to get to the point where we can start applying fear damage. In the next video, we're going to show you how to set it up in your HUD.